Hi kids, it's Bunny with another junk journal, and this one I call Lark, which is a girl's name and bird, and it features birds and winged women, and I have a fabric covered cover, which is soft back. And before I get inside, let me show you, I have some miniature journals that I usually put inside, but it makes it too darn fat, so I'm just going to include them on the side. And I'll show you a little bit what they're like, because they have little teeny ephemera and lots of pages if you want to write something really small. And this one has I thought it had a bag in it. Maybe it doesn't. No. But that's okay. Okay. And so on this one, you see there's a pretty brooch. It's not vintage. It's just a pretty brooch. And velvet ribbon holds the whole thing together. And I'll take that out of the way. And the first page ignore that mess, is a lace pocket inside the cover with a journaling card, and they're all blank on the back so you can journal on them. Tags are also blank on the back. This is sort of a tag, but it's more of a bookmark, and it's not blank. But the tags are blank on the back. This has some texture paste feather. And there's a glassy envelope with a letter inside for the owner of the journal, telling them what a junk journal is, if they don't know. And the lovely digitals in this journal are from Sweet Vintage Prints on Etsy, and I've bought a lot of pretty things from them. Highly recommend them. Pages are coffee dyed, and put lace on the edges of some of them. There's a winged woman. And here is a tuck with a journaling card and a tag and a pretty little envelope. And inside of it is a sticker and a vintage stamp. Okay. There's little clusters and other details throughout. This is vintage wallpaper, by the way. This is a flip-out envelope. Inside is a winged woman. Some of the cards I put ripped brown paper behind because I like the way that looks. And of course you can still write on the back. And I just thought that was a neat look. So some of them I did that too. And over here there is some vintage ephemera. It's a blank check from 1930s. You can see the date is 1903, so it's meant for use in the 1930s. Here is some texture paste of a feather that I did. And it's handmade paper. And here is some vellum with a pretty picture on it. Some vintage sheet music. This little bag. Inside of it is a cigarette card, vintage. And here's an old map. And in this pocket there's a pretty tag and a journaling card. There's a teeny tiny envelope. Inside of it is a teeny tiny journaling card that I made. Those are such fun to make, little miniature things. And behind it is a vintage stamp. Okay. And some vintage ephemera. It's an old needle book. And this is an envelope. Inside of it is a vintage photograph. A lady sitting on her steps. I'll put that back in later. Moving onward, page from an old bird book. This is a page from a vintage book. This is some kind of thin handmade paper. And this is a page from a vintage book. Copper-plated columns. This is a coffee-dyed ledger paper, and on this side I put some gesso so it'll be easier to write on it. And this is paper out of a vintage book, out of the front of the book. The center of the signature. And in this pocket is a beautiful journaling card and a tag. Sorry if there's a glare. And another pretty little envelope with a sticker and a stamp inside. And here's a vintage photograph with a vintage car. Very cool. Some more gesso on ledger paper. That's the other side of the papers we saw earlier. And here's a flip out envelope. It's coffee dyed with a lacy pattern. And inside of it is a pretty journaling card and some vintage buttons on a button card. And on the other side there's a vintage photograph and a little bag with another little vintage photograph. Another lovely couple. And on this bag is that's a vintage liquor label of some sort, from some foreign liquor company. More sheet music, more vellum. Isn't that pretty? And more digitals. And in this pocket there's a journaling card and a pretty tag. And here's a vintage library card. Dewey Decimal System. Remember that? Here's a little teeny tiny envelope with a teeny tiny journaling card that I made and a vintage stamp. And inside this envelope there is the cute journaling card. The winged woman. Is this, oh yeah, this is vintage wallpaper. And page from vintage book. And more lovely digitals. Here's a journaling card. And a tag. This is some vintage stationery that you can write on, journal on. And here's another little envelope. Inside of it are a couple of, well, it's a little journaling card. And this is another vintage cigarette trading card. And a vintage stamp, postage stamp. Oh, vintage magazine page. More vintage book pages. Another texture paste feather. I like the way they turned out. In this pocket there is Ritzy Mitzy journaling card and a tag and a vintage photograph and another teeny tiny envelope with teeny tiny journaling card and a vintage stamp in it. Here is some vellum, a pretty picture printed on it. More wallpaper, vintage wallpaper. This is another vintage liquor label. California Cerveza L. And here's some vintage sheet music. In this little bag there's a vintage, I believe this is a tea card. Vintage tea card, trading card. And ledger with just some pretty paper. Here is an envelope, flip out, with a beautiful journaling card. And on the other side there is, this is a vintage postcard. And it might be 1940. I'm not sure of the date. That's what it looks like, it says. There's a ruffle. Here's some more vintage, not vintage, texture paste. Texture paste flowers. And this is a giant pocket. It has a picture of a hen, turkey, and young from an Audubon book on it. A description on the back. And inside here is a giant vintage photograph of this shockingly good-looking guy. And there's a large journaling card, lots of room to write. And this is a vintage letter from 1942 from a soldier to his wife. A love letter. And you can read that. This is some sari trim from India. I just thought it was pretty. Here is a picture. I'll go ahead and take it out of the photo corners. But aren't they the most evil looking people you've ever seen? It looks like two witches and a warlock. And I sure hope they aren't still alive and watching this. I apologize, but that's what it looks like to me. continuing onward. Here is journaling card. Very pretty birds. And a tag. And a vintage photograph. Happy looking group of people. It's got some names on the back. I'm not sure what year. Another teeny tiny envelope with teeny tiny stuff inside. And this is an envelope. And inside of it is a vintage photograph of this couple jokingly sitting on a statue of an elephant. That's vintage. It's a ruffle with hearts on it. And this bag is a vintage photograph of a place that's intriguing looking and some vintage tickets. There's a belly band with a journaling card and another journaling card and a vintage photograph. And there's another flip out envelope with a journaling card and a vintage photograph, another nice old car. And this is just a page from a vintage bird book. More vellum with a pretty picture printed on it. It's just a pretty picture on a handmade paper. And in this pocket is a journaling card and a tag, and here's a little glassine envelope, and inside of it is a little heart with a bird in it. And this is actually like a matchbook. It untucks from the seal and you can open it and have extra writing space. And it tucks right back in. Okay. And then we come to the back of the book. There's some journaling cards and a tag. And I believe that's it for this journal. And you can find it in my shop, Mimosa Morin Journals on Etsy. And thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.